Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, a glassblower. Join us as we explore the topics that affect the lives and livelihoods of art show artists.
Welcome back to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are. I'm fresh off the road from the shortened Austin Armadillo Bazaar. Douglas, it's nice to see you. You've been busy at work in the studio.
We have been, and it's holiday week, so we're all just trying to get stuff done for our businesses, but also get stuff done for family, and that's been a crazy situation.
I'm sure I could imagine that glass is a pretty giftable object for people and around the holidays, so I hope you've been shipping a lot of packages.
We have. But I wanted to bring up that we had promised that this was going to be an episode that we sat down with Ben Fry and talked about that survey. But we're going to have to postpone that on to the next one. All the figuring out when in the schedule that we could, all three of us, sit down and have a talk about it wasn't going to happen until the new year.
Got a little tricky. Ben's in Paris right now. He has his lovely girlfriend lives there in Paris, and he's spending the holidays out there. So lucky Ben. You didn't need to be. I don't want to sit down in Paris and talk about art shows and data.
He wants to have croissants and all that good stuff.
Baguette.
So what we promised, we'll do that first thing in 2022 when we start season 2. But yeah, tell us about Armadillo. How was everything for your show?
It was cool to dip my toe into that one. I think I went into that one a little bit tired after One of a Kind. I don't know that I would necessarily do both of those in the same year again. But I was really impressed with the way the folks ran the show. They're they've created this beautiful family-run event. The people that work for them they all feel like just a unit of just tight togetherness. There's a lot of care, a lot of kindness, a lot of respect for the artists. It felt like one of those shows that's going to pay off for me in the future. I met a lot of future clients, a lot of people that were building and renovating and had a great time listening to the music. It did not immediately pay off for me. I made it enough money to feel like it was worth it. It didn't blow the doors off of it. I know a lot of people did, but I don't know. It felt like I could grow there if I wanted to.
I've noticed that with some holiday themed shows where it's like people are going with a singular focus, maybe for gifts for mom, and then they're thinking about themselves for down the road. So it is a good opportunity this time of the year to plant seeds.
True, and I don't think that David Bjurstrom would mind me name dropping him. I know he had a really successful weekend, so it is a market for fine art. I have this idea that I want to sit down and talk with him as maybe a segment of next year and talk about surprising people, because I feel like why I did well at One of a Kind is like a lot of my sales were surprise sales. They didn't expect to see me, whereas maybe Armadillo, they did expect to see the themes and body of work that I bring to the table with all of my music themes, since it is a music themed show. David doesn't do any of that. So it'd be interesting to talk to him about those kind of surprises and whether it's better to be in a show as something that people don't expect to see versus what they do. So it could be an interesting segment down the line.
Cool.
Another thing about Armadillo, Douglas, not just is it a family-run kind of thing, they have a staff that consists mostly of folks that do Renaissance fairs, fairs. Yeah, and these people are used to running a fair like every single weekend. So they have this staff that kind of comes in and runs a Renaissance fair in different places. And it's interesting to know that there's a parallel with the art shows. Like you have these people that only do one art show out of the year, but they're used to getting people in places and out of places. And it's interesting that the Armadillo people just hired a staff that already exists. So, I don't know, kind of cool.
There's like a logistical thing that can be repeated, that they can come in, repeat the formula, and have things go off without a hitch.
Right. And I mean, I said to one of their people, and they're like, well, are you ready for loadout? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's just going to kind of be a nightmare and I'm going to have to. And she was like, nope, not on my watch. It's not a nightmare. We're getting your ass out of here and on the street. And I'm like,
no lot
okay.
age for Will Armstrong.
No way, man. It was cool. I was really impressed. And I thought that was a really cool way to kind of think outside of the box for show directors to hire a staff that already kind of exists. So definitely an idea for Texas shows, because those women and men know what's up. They're kind too. They're patient, and they've been there. So interesting. Anyway, moving on.
Thinking back about this past season, we've had so many great guests, and I kind of came up with a little segment for us, a game.
A game? It's early, Douglas. I don't know how I'm feeling about games. What do you got?
It's the Independent Artist Trivia Game. We're going to go back and talk a little bit about some of our guests and see if we remember some of the unique stories they told us about them.
Is this actually just a quiz to see if I'm listening to our own podcast?
I listen to these interviews over and over and over and over and over again as I edit them. There are some interesting little tidbits that stick with me. Yeah, I don't know. Thought I'd highlight a little bit.
All right. I accuse myself of being a little bit more like a golden retriever. I get distracted by a bouncing ball or a shiny thing. So we'll see if I paid attention.
Some of them I made kind of easy for you. I think you'll get. But, this is for everyone listening to play along, too, and shout out at your phone.
Oh, God.
First section is about previous careers, our guests who had previous careers. And the first question is, which guest of ours took acting classes with the hopes of starring in soap operas someday?
Is that Keena Crow?
That was Amber Marshall. Glassblower, Amber Marshall. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Amber, okay, shout out to Amber. Amber's going through it right now. Her husband, Mike, blew out his Achilles. So, boy, do I feel his pain going into the holiday season and trying to do production work for next year. So, cheers to our good friend, Mike. And my wife would like to send a big cheers out to Amber for having to put up with Mike and to play nurse to him over the next 6 weeks or however long it takes for him to get that boot on like it did me. So
after I found out about Mike's accident and I brought it up to Will, and Will's like, yeah, I knew about it. And by the way, Douglas, it happens in threes. So I've been babying my Achilles tendon since I heard about it.
Yeah, be careful out there, folks. It's not a pleasant injury. All right, what's your next question?
Which guest graduated with an MFA in theater directing?
That would be Stephen King.
You're right. Ding, ding, ding. Which guest got their start working in the field of mental health?
I don't know.
You responded to him, maybe that's why I feel so relaxed when I come into your booth, Daryl.
Daryl, that's right. That was even my question. I don't remember a damn thing, Douglas.
All right, and the next segment is about prestige and honor. Which guest of ours...
No way, you're going to go past theater and you're not going to mention Keena Crow's porno career?
Well, everyone remembers the porno career, for crying out loud.
All right. I want to see some of those costumes. All right, moving on.
The topic of prestige. Which of our former guests is a direct descendant from a king?
Jaja?
Yeah, right. It was Jeremiah Andrew Jaja. He came from Nigeria, and his family is a direct descendant from the king who founded the city that he lives in, and it was King Jaja. So,
little known fact, they actually based Coming to America off of our good friend Jaja.
They did not
prior
do
to his
that.
Birth. All right, moving on.
This is going to be an easy one for you, Will. Which guest was surprised to find Alicia Keys and Halle Berry sharing and commenting on their work on Instagram?
That's my man Clifton.
That's
Henri right there. Yes.
There you go. That's liked
exciting.
His piece Wings, and then he did a reboot on that and made it even more famous by featuring Kamala Harris in that image.
Yeah, amazing. And a shout out to Clifton. He only has one in that series of Wings left. He sold one this past week, and he only has one of those showing left. So huge piece. I mean, it's just one of those kind of career-making kind of pieces of work. So shout out to our good friend Clifton.
All right, Cliff. The next question under prestige is, which of our previous guests has their own video podcast?
That would be art by Ty.
Ty Taoli. Yes, he has DOD 45, Discussions Over Drawing. I think everyone should go back and check him out. He's doing more episodes every week.
Every week, and a cool little fact, he had a couple of hip-hop artists, Black Liquid, he's going by Black Lick now, and Mopes, that he had on his podcast. That was actually cool to me because Black Liquid used to have the show After Mine at WRIR Independent Radio, so I know that guy and love his music. It's incredibly inspiring stuff. If you like real hip hop as far as like real stories and just real life, check that guy out. It's incredible. So a little shout out to DOD 45 and Art by Ty.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Next segment is under the category of stories that guests have told from being at shows. The first one is which of our guests compared the customers walking around with masks on as taking away their tell in poker.
Oh, man. Was that Get It in the Wayback Machine? Was that the very first interview I did with David Oleski?
It was. It was our pilot episode with David Oleski. He was giving us a report from the road while we were all still locked down, and he was out doing shows and giving us kind of the what's going on out there kind of feel.
Yeah, very cool. I love the fact that he was able to give us that first report when we were kind of feeling our way. We weren't really sure how this podcast thing was going to go at that point. We weren't sure how we were going to formulate it.
All right, the next question is which of our guests talked about swapping out their older pieces from collectors with new pieces a couple of years later?
You know, I remember engaging with that and it sparking an interest in me, but I can't remember who it was.
That was Eric Lee. He said that when he first came out of the gate and he had really great success, a few years later he looked back at his original body of work and he wanted to update folks. He said, listen, I'm going to take that back from you and I'll replace it with new and improved work.
That's amazing. I used to work in this frame shop in Richmond, Virginia, and we had this really nutty oil painter, and he never ever would finish his work. Like he always thought it was a work in progress, and he came in with our boss and unbeknownst to him took one of the oil paintings that we were framing and kept working on it. And he likened himself to like one of these duck stamp oil painters.
Okay.
So this one of his collectors had already bought the painting and he's like, well, I got to work on that thing now. He was kind of this big foghorn leghorn kind of guy. And he brought the painting back and he's like, yo, you boys be careful, I say, because this thing's still wet. And we framed the damn thing and the client was super pissed and they wanted to sue us. I think they did actually sue the frame shop because they claimed that it was not the same painting. So we had to go back in and get this guy to either, I can't remember if we got him to take it back off because the oil was still wet or what. I don't know. I was only in my 20s at the time, but I see my paintings are never done, boy.
I see, son.
Moving on. No more foghorn.
Okay. This will be an easy one for you, Will. Which of our former guests told us a story about being at a show and their assistant handed off one of their most expensive pieces in the booth for a customer to look at? The customer put it in their pocket and walked away.
I don't know.
I thought it was going to be an easy one. We were talking about jewelers who have theft and they just look at the piece and walk away.
Yeah, just walked away. Exactly.
She said, Mom, where did that piece go? And she said, he just left with it. He what? He left with it.
That's amazing. Yeah, how can I forget that one? All right, what else you got for me?
All right, next is under the category of quotables. These are some kind of funny quotes that I plucked out of the episodes. Who coined the phrase, not my monkeys, not my circus, but I really like circuses?
I'm starting to feel like I don't actually listen to this podcast. Was that Dahlquist?
That was our good friend David Bierstrom talking about how him and Carla will tag team on Facebook.
Yes, but he does like circuses. That's right. He likes
those circuses.
I remember that well.
That's right. All right, and then this one is, who said about themselves that I'm a contrarian, obstinate, anti-authoritarian personality, and whatever you expect I'm going to do, especially when I was young, I'm not going to do.
Did I say that?
That was you. No.
Or Dylan? I don't even know.
Dylan. Yeah, it was Dylan.
Yeah.
A couple episodes ago, Dylan. The episode titled Capital F, so that gives that one right there.
Nice.
who compared themselves to being a composer, relating to their work by saying, "I write the tunes."
I don't fucking know that one either.
Okay, well, this was one of your guests, and
All
they
right.
said, "Will, you're a music man. You know how it goes. I write the tunes."
Yeah, that was
and-
Gena Grushenko, correct?
That's right, talking about how
Yeah,
he
it's
lays
my
the
boy.
groundwork. And then Signy is the lyricist, and she's the
Yeah.
performer, and she
That's
gets the
beautiful.
adoration for it. So,
And I love the selfless nature of that and that was one of my things I really wanted to talk to them about. And I loved how she gave him credit. And I also loved how he didn't necessarily want it. So I really enjoyed that talk with both of those guys.
yeah, that was the Partners in Paint, episode 19. I can relate to that. It's that selflessness in working in a partnership where you're confident in what you bring to the table and you're willing to let your partner shine. And sometimes you get the focus and sometimes the other one gets the focus, but you're confident in what you contribute to the body of work.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a bunch over the podcast, but Renee has to sometimes deal with the sexism of glass and the fact that, it's Sigworth and here's Douglas, he's the artist, which she gets equal credit, and you're always very careful to give her that credit, which I think is incredibly important. So cheers to Renee for putting up with yo shit.
All right, last one under quotables is which of our guests suggested that we title their episode Bang Time?
Bang Time. Was that him or me? That's Schwegman.
That was Schwegman. That's right.
Yeah, it's like, it's to all the girls that I didn't bang by Michael Schwegman. Cheers to our good friend Michael for that one. That's a good memorable.
Speaking of Michael, I saw on social how a celebrity acquired one of his F-bombs as a gift this week.
I saw that. It was a talk show host on what network was that? CNN maybe?
It was one of the news networks, either CNN or MSNBC. Schmerkanish.
Yes, exactly. The talk show host gave it to his producer. I can only assume because he's dropping F-bombs that need to be edited, unlike mine.
Okay, the next segment is under the title of History Lesson.
Okay.
This is some history stories that people have told about their past. How many of our guests have told stories about being stopped by the police?
Stopped by the cops. I remember that's the Keena Crow episode, stopped by the police. I also remember
she was doing the cannonball run and had the pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
She did a little speeding, and that was one of her last times of actually driving herself because the stress behind the travel made her want to have her studio assistant drive her stuff all over, and she flies in and does the show. So that was kind of a good segment there.
That, and I remember William talking about being stopped by the police, and then kind of the nerves with that, and then also the guy at the end calling him old man.
He's like, right. If this white beard is gonna let you leave me alone, then more power to it.
Keep a little white in that beard.
Yeah.
Is that it?
There was
two?
one other memorable story. It was Mickey Cunningham got pulled over by the police because she was driving home from a show once, and her two little kids, Reiko, who was also on that episode, Reiko Yucatel, they wouldn't stay in their seats. They're climbing all over the back of the van, over the display, and the police saw this and had to stop her and say, "Get those kids strapped in the back of your car, please."
Keep her honest. Okay, cool. What else you got on history, Douglas?
Which guest told us the story that their medium abruptly changed course when the class that they wanted to take was completely full, and the placeholder class that they took sent them in a completely new direction?
That was your wonderful talk with our good friend Helen Gottlieb.
Yes. She really wanted to do figure drawing. She thought that's what she was going to be, a figure drawer, and printmaking changed her life.
I remember that one because I had an experience in my own life that I remember blowing off a class and our teacher telling us that we could not go see the guest illustrator, C.F. Payne, because we were in a class and we had to sit down and do this children's illustration class. And I packed up my stuff and I left in the middle of the class, and I got a grade doc, but I used that technique every time I hit a new piece of painting that I learned from CF Payne. So
yeah, that's been a common theme with us throughout all the episodes of how a shift like that comes and it really kind of propels us to the next stage. Everything, good or bad, is propelling us to the next step in life.
Yep, it all does. All right, what you got any more?
I do. Which guest is the child of an artist? And when they were young, it was their job to go throughout town and stuff the mailboxes with their parents' postcards.
Well, we've had a couple of children of artists, correct? Because Ryko is one. Is that her? Is that the one?
It was Marjolaine. Marjolaine Vanderhart, the understanding the digital marketplace, which makes sense because she's so good about how to put yourself out there, how to market, how to really be a business person regarding your artwork. So
yeah, very cool one. If you've not listened to that one, might want to go back and check out some of the business. I had to listen to that one in segments, almost chapters, because I was like, I can't do it, and then I go back and listen to a little more.
Yeah, right. You can do the social media piece of it and then go back and talk about the mailing list part of it. It's a lot of great information and tips. All right. Which guest compares doing things the same way every year to her grandma's ham?
No clue.
That's Chris Dahlquist.
Was it really?
She uses that in one of her career mentor classes, talking about doing things the same every single year just because you've always done them the same way. And she says that there's a story about the woman who's cutting the ends off her ham and putting the roast in the oven. And somebody asks, well, why are we doing it that way? And she says, well, Grandma always did it that way. So she goes and asks Grandma, well, why do we do it that way? And she said, because it didn't fit in my pan, so I needed to cut the ends off. But the person making the ham now isn't using Grandma's pan. They just cut,
I love that quote. You know what, Douglas? That quote about ham reminds me of a quote that's coming up in this episode today where I talk about Ray Alphonse telling me about ham. So a little something, a teaser for the talk that I deal with Dylan.
Little tease. When you hear that quote, think back to this moment right here.
I only want ham, Douglas.
All right, we're getting to the end of my list here, so hang in there. Which artist painted their van with the title Jimmy Buffett or Bust the night before the concert?
That's our good friend Carol Swayze. I know that one.
Carol Swayze. That's right.
Man, I was thinking about her just this past week in Austin. I saw some great live blues and a blues legend. Got to meet Jimmy Lee Vaughan face to face, and Carol and I are always kind of teasing each other with different music that we've seen on the road. So, cheers to Carol and happy holidays. I know this is a tough one for her.
Yeah, love you, Carol. All right, next one is, which of our guests referenced the novel The Midnight Library regarding the Book of Regrets as a reason for seizing opportunities whenever they arise?
Was that Reese Witherspoon, my talk with Reese's Book Club?
Quite possibly. It was our good friend, art fair fixer herself, Cindy Lear.
Right on. Very cool. I hung on some of the dirt on Cindy's. I didn't remember all of the other little pearls she dropped.
That was her defining reason for heading out to California and taking on Sausalito, because she didn't want it to be one of those things she said, I wished I would have done.
That's awesome.
Even though things didn't go as she had hoped.
Sure.
And she shared a lot of the details about that experience. The pearl out of it was she doesn't want to live her life with putting things in the Book of Regrets.
Yeah, and just think of all the things she learned when she took it to her next stop, which is Fort Myers. She's gearing up for a big show this coming spring down there in Fort Myers. So thank you, Cindy, and good luck with the show, and can't wait to hear all about it and hear how that one goes for you.
And here's our final question, Will, and maybe process of elimination. You'll figure out which guest hasn't been featured yet. But which of our former guests did we talk to on their birthday following an unfortunate zipper accident?
It's Big J McDougall and his salmon-colored capri pants.
Cindy McDougall, we promise we wouldn't air that part of the episode, but we couldn't end the year without at least referencing it, okay?
Absolutely. And, I just referenced his pants, but he's got some of the best pants in the art show game. I talk about having money in lucky socks, and that man's got some money in some pants right there. He always looks sharp.
Yeah. Well, You guys, this has been an amazing season, and we are planning a season 2. We're going to take a couple of weeks for a break, and we'll launch on January 17th, season 2. And we just really appreciate everyone listening and being engaged this year, and we've learned a lot from each other.
Yep. Who knew this would continue the way it has and take on a life of its own? I appreciate you and your editing skills and poring over these interviews and making us sound good. So thank you to Douglas. That's a huge. I like to talk. I like to just have ideas. And Douglas, you are the man that has made this thing happen. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. Thanks for this project.
Happy New Year to you as well. And you are the spark and the humor and the fun that makes this thing work. So thanks so much for all your inspiration.
It's both of us. You're very kind.
We really appreciate all the listens and all of the engagement. And there's one thing we'd like to ask is if you are so inclined and you are enjoying the show and you want to help us spread further, please just go on to your streaming service. If it's Apple's one of the big ones, and give us a review. The more reviews we get, the more Apple picks it up, and they will start spreading it to artists who want to get into this industry and that sort of thing. And this will just help spread the show on to people we don't personally know.
Yep. Comment on our things on social media. It helps the algorithm there that we learned about from Marjolaine Vanderhart in episode 2.
That's right.
All sorts of things help us. So any way you can spread the word, if you hear a great interview that you want to share with your friends, please do so, or comment, or drop us a line or a question on the Facebook. We always like to respond to our listeners and further the conversation. Let yourself be part of the convo as we take this thing into the next year.
This episode, we are airing the second half of your talk with Dylan Strzynski, and he's going to talk all about the film that him and Helen worked on together.
Yeah, the movie is going to be aired at a couple of different festivals up this coming year, and we'll make sure to tell you when you're able to watch that online and stream it. But man, it's a cool talk, and it just digs down deep into the interesting characters that exist on the art show circuit.
Yeah.
Just talks about the people.
Yeah, that's really cool. So here it is. Here is part 2 of your talk with Dylan Strzynski.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Well, I've been getting notices from shows this week that I need to jump on and pay for my booth, but I'm not at home at my desk. So I really enjoy that I'm able just to flip open my phone.
Flip open your phone. Do you have a flip phone, Doug?
I guess so.
Does Zap work on your flip phone? Because that's impressive.
No, but I turn on my phone, I log into Zap, and I'm able to buy my booth right there on the spot, and I can make sure I get that double booth or that corner booth I'm looking for, and I don't get stuck somewhere I don't want to be.
Quit talking about double booths, because if those shits are sold out by the time I come to get to them, I'm going to be mad.
Well, I sure do appreciate that with Zap we're able to keep up on our business with the shows on the road using our mobile device.
Well, let's talk about that movie officially, because
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people that the only reason they're going to listen to this podcast is so they can hear me talk about that movie.
that's the only reason anybody's tuning into the podcast at all, and just hopes that we're going to talk about the movie, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're not on, I just hope they talk about the movie.
Yeah. This will, by the way, this will be the very first time I've actually had a public full conversation about it.
Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
I've a little tiny thing here and there. Like we had to tune in to on a Zoom call. I had a screening out west, you know, maybe a month and a half ago or something, and that was real brief. But I think for the general public,
Just get down in it and talk movie.
they don't know, and I know. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about it.
So yeah, you did a first of all, it's called The Life That We Make, correct?
Yep.
I'll let you introduce it. I don't need to talk about it too much, but it just getting down into the art show world and talking to some people that you admire and that we all kind of know.
Yeah. Well, that's not what it's about. That's what it looks like it's about.
Right.
And that's what it's superficially about. What it is about are some very interesting real life people who I know, who I think you should meet. And they just happen to all be artists.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. You know, And I say that kind of half joking because I've always had this impression that people were expecting it to be like this. It's the art fair confidential, the tell all, the how to do an art fair,
right?
And who's the big earners and how you can do that. And that's not what it was at all, you know. And I should say that the people that you see in that movie were very, very specifically the subjects, partly because they were people who I just socially had a comfortable access to. And that's really important because you'd be surprised how often people aren't so excited to like have a camera in their face and, and talking.
Yeah. Or a microphone.
Right.
So we're definitely running into that too.
And then there are the people who are kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily the ones you want to talk to. But I chose those artists because they were very interesting people who could, I thought would really, they would work in front of the camera. They were artists who seemed to reflect through their art and their attitudes about their art something that presented the show artists as like a fine art with a higher stature than the fine art world and academia will generally acknowledge.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
we touched on that a little bit.
We did touch on it a little bit, and obviously those aren't the only people that do that.
No.
I could have made a similar movie with a whole different half a dozen of people.
Yeah,
and in fact, there's the whole other movie with the artists that we didn't put in the movie.
I bet.
And often the only reason that they didn't make it was maybe like my photography was particularly bad on those interviews, or the audio was strange, or they weren't quite comfortable enough in front of the camera.
Did anybody come to you? Well, how come I didn't make it in the movie?
Actually, maybe only one or two people. That was it. What the one I kept waiting for, honestly, Matthew Cornell.
Yeah.
He likes to talk about art,
Sure.
and he's very confident, and he's got a sizable ego, and he's a very charming guy. I like him a lot. I have several hours that I spent talking with him and about artwork and painting and all of this, and we just didn't end up using it.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, is he going to give me a hassle about this? And he's never mentioned it since, because I felt like he was really, really excited to be in the movie, and we just didn't use it. He said some great stuff, and I haven't watched that footage now in years. But what happens when you do a thing like this is you end up with a whole bunch of footage, and you have to figure out how to make it into something cohesive that you can watch. And I, in my naivete, thought that I was going to be able to do that myself.
Okay.
And there's kind of two things going on. I knew that was going to be difficult, and I didn't think that I would be working on it totally alone for as long as I did.
Yeah, it's a long process. I mean, and there are a lot of edits too.
There's a lot of edits. There's a lot of stuff. I was about a year and a half into it on my own, just getting bogged down. I would put together these big sequences about things that I just thought were so fascinating, and it just couldn't go together as a movie.
Yeah.
And I finally just, thank God, I got in contact with Patrick Rich, who is the co-director and editor of the movie. Who it's weird. We've never met in person.
I mean, sometimes those are the best partnerships. I mean,
yeah, I know his brother a little bit.
Yeah.
He was like a guy I would see at parties. He was kind of more a part of like Helen's younger sister's social circle. And I was just like at barbecue cookout. I don't know, whatever it was. And I was like, oh, hey man, how you doing? And then I'm talking to this guy and he's like, what are you up to? And we went back and forth and it had been weighing on my mind. And I was like, well, really, I've been working on this movie, this documentary about art show artists. And I've been trying to edit it now for about a year and a half, man. I'm just really bogged down in it. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's really tough. And then he's like, well, my brother is a filmmaker and an editor and blah, blah, blah. And he's he's at this college and he's done all this stuff. And so this sounds like a project he might be interested in.
Wow.
I'll give him your info. And the next day, it was like Sunday, I get this big long email from him. He'd watched like my little Sizzler reel and was all about it. And we had this series of long exchanges and phone conversations and we got going. And then that was several more years.
Yeah.
Because he was doing this while doing other things. He was a teacher, and then like his father died, and he moved. Life. And at one point, we had this catastrophic system failure where we lost all the work. And I had to spend thousands of dollars getting it all taken back out of a machine and all this stuff. And it goes on. And you do an edit of a movie and you watch it, and it's almost there. It's like 75%.
And that's when you lost it?
No, well, yeah, at one point we really did. We lost that much of it. And I, even though we both had all of the footage backed up, he had somehow missed, like, not backed up the project files. So the movie itself was gone in this crashed drive. And we had to pay somebody to restore all that and get it out. It was very expensive. But it was probably another extra year. Patrick really, really made it into the movie that it is. I
amazing.
Did all of that stuff. And I do not wish to put forth the notion that I made that myself in isolation at all.
Yeah.
It was a real collaboration with him doing at the end the heavy lifting.
So I mean, what I enjoy about it, besides just the subject, and there are a bunch of my friends on there, but there's a space to it. And you talk about cutting Matthew Cornell out of it. I don't know where you're like it's almost like good music. There are artists like.
I mean, he wasn't the only one cut, by the way. He was just example.
I'm sure. But like from Prince to Tom Petty, they talk about the space in the music, the space in the funk, the music exists around, but there's a dynamics to it. And those long stretches of highway or rain interspersed between the interviews, that's what makes it to me, and it gives it this feeling that you actually have of being on the road, and it gives you the feeling of getting from one place to the next that I really enjoy too.
I'm glad that you're talking about that, because that stuff to me, that these kind of atmospheric aesthetic elements that make it have this kind of ambience. Was really, really important to me. And I knew that I wanted that, this space, these beats that are very contemplative.
Yes.
But I also wanted it to be existing within this framework that was kind of a funky collage of image and sound. And I knew exactly what I wanted the movie to look like, how I wanted it to sound. And I explained it to Patrick, and he looked at the footage, and he made that thing. Like, it was incredible. It was, he did some things that I wouldn't have instinctively done, like he introduced that stuff with the split screens.
Yeah.
And at first I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, and then by the time I got to the end, I was like, no, that's actually what it is. Like that was one of the things. And I was really impressed by that. And when I talk about it a lot when people ask me about the movie, because like I was standing on the beach in Florida in Vero Beach. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Art Under the Oaks. Helen was doing that show, and I walked down to the town, down to the beach, and I was standing there, kind of with the sun starting to set behind me, on the other side of, the peninsula of Florida, and I'm looking out the ocean, and this movie, this whole idea, the whole thing just sprang forth from my brain, fully formed. Like it made complete sense. All of a sudden. I could see how these interesting people who all have this art show thing in common could be presented in a moving picture form, and it would look this way and it would have this certain sound. And I had to get right to work on it, but it took me like a year to be able to get started on it. And then that process, it was so long, and to see it come out on the other end as that thing that I had totally envisioned, that it was so complete. Wow. It's one of those rare things where the thing you're like, oh, I have this great idea. This is it. I'm not totally naive. I know how, like I say, like my best friend's a filmmaker, and I had made like little art videos and been around enough and all of that. And I knew that it was going to be a lot of work.
But there's a scope and a scale of what you're doing that is so big.
Right.
That, I mean, it had to be incredibly rewarding to have that, to bring it all back home.
Totally.
And finish it up like that. I mean, that you were talking about the beats in it. There are a couple of moments in it, and it got my attention. And, I watched it a while back when you first released it, and you had done a GoFundMe so we could watch it. The folks that donated could watch it for a certain amount of time.
Do I owe you something?
No.
Okay.
I've got it. You gave me a nice piece of Helen's print, and
okay, nice,
no,
excellent.
We're good. But there was like when I watched it the first time around, and I was going to like, wow, I should watch it again before we talk. And I put it on. I'm like, I'll just listen to it like it's a podcast. It ain't a podcast. It's very visual, and you have to watch it in order to see. But there's like, even at the very beginning, there's a moment where your wife, Helen Gottlieb, another fine artist on the circuit. We've mentioned her a couple of different times, but Helen is kind of waiting for the rain. Mm-hmm. And there's an anxiety that we all know that is of that, and you can see the wind blow her hair just a little bit, and it's just like, well, here it comes, and it's just like, oh God, it is powerful, and I don't think it's specific just to what we do, but we all know that feeling so well. And I don't know, the fact that you were able to give those spaces in it to let it breathe, and to let us smell the linseed oil on Joaquin's house, and you can definitely you can smell his porch just in the flick. So I don't know where do you watch it? How do we, because we're talking this up, but how do you get to watch it?
Right now, I'm not sure where we're at with festivals. I haven't seen the schedule.
Okay,
but we've been through the summer and fall. They've been playing at small film festivals. So there is still no official, like, I can't say, hey, you can watch it on Amazon or something.
Sure.
Because we kind of have to wait for the festival cycle to go out, because there's some of them want the film to have never been premiered, which and all that stuff. And you can't have already be distributed.
You like virgin movies, not slut movies.
Yeah. It's all that kind of stuff. So I can't tell the general public where to go yet.
Gotcha.
To see it, but obviously you watched it, so there are ways.
I can just tease people with it.
You can just tease people with it. Well, and you got to watch the full resolution version.
I did
too, because when we had the invite screening last spring, I know it was we weren't able to stream it at HD, and it's a whole bunch of things. There's every kind of footage in there: HD, SD. There's phone cameras. There's some really old little Super 8 stuff in there. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But No, and I'm tremendously proud of it for everything I'm saying. It was amazing. But then there's this other weird thing that happens. It's like you work on this project so hard and you get it all together and you see it and it's done. And then you're just like, there it is.
Yeah. You got a little postpartum depression there, Dylan?
A little bit. And you're like, nah, it's just like, oh yeah, this is what happens when you make a movie. Some people watch it.
People watched it. It's once you're able to get it out to mass, I don't know, some kind of streaming or whatever, we'll promote it again and let people know where they can watch it, because I think it's there's a recognition that you have when you see it, and even if you don't know, the Kempers and the Whipples and Joaquin and Janice, it's a really special connection that you have with the film, just knowing what we do.
And I want people to know what we do, but I didn't want that to be the subject.
Yep.
I wanted interesting people to be the subject, because I'm a fan of what I call like real documentaries, that don't have a bunch of reenactments and they don't have some sort of political agenda that they're making an argument for. It's
right.
I like, here is an interesting person and the camera is on. Look at this, and that goes back to, like the Frederick Wiseman documentaries. I don't know if you ever have seen those, but he did like the Titty Cut Follies and a series of just these really straightforward documentaries. One called like High School and all of that. And then he did that one a few years ago in the Hermitage that's many hours long. Yeah. It's just camera in the Hermitage. And then I'm a huge fan, and this might be the missing link to understanding that movie, is that I love Errol Morris's Vernon, Florida.
I don't know that.
Are you kidding?
No.
Oh my gosh. It is not for everybody. It's offbeat. It's a short feature that he made right after that Gates of Heaven. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
It's about the pet cemetery that they have to move and all the controversy. Right. It's so strange. But he made this movie about this town called Vernon, Florida. And originally it was going to be called Stubbville or Stumpville or something, because he had heard from people in the in insurance or working for the welfare department or something, or disability, that there was this community in Florida that had a overwhelming population of amputees and people that were living on disability. Yeah. And because apparently there was this thing going on where someone would like just stick their arm in a machine and then get on disability and go live in this cheap little town in the Panhandle.
Jesus.
And it really, yeah. And he went to this town to live for a while and work on the movie. And then he apparently started kind of getting threatened a little bit. But while he was there, he just became enamored with these strange rural people.
Yeah.
And he interviewed a few of them. Like there's this guy who's just obsessed with turkey hunting, and there's this other guy who's like a holy roller preacher who is talking about how he got a van for his business because it was time for God to make sure he got that. And then there's a guy who has a worm farm and all of this. It just talks to these weirdos.
That's amazing.
And I love that kind of movie.
Yeah.
Where it's just stripped down. It's about interesting people that I want, that I like, that I want to share with you. And if you're an interesting person, you're not in it. I'm sorry. Everybody can't be in it. That's what it is.
Did you have people walking around your booth like it shows, like just kind of wanted to, they're like, here I am. I wonder if he'll film me. Yeah,
I don't know. Honestly, there were a couple, but not very many. It like, really wasn't like that. Yeah. And there's so much, there could be a whole other movie, which I'm not going to make, don't expect it. But another movie with the stuff that didn't make the cut. And like a great example is that one moment in the movie where I'm on the screen. That's not fake. That only happened because I was at Paul Andrews' house and I was sitting down to interview him, and I had spent so much time with him, and that's the only time you hear his voice.
Yeah.
I was sitting down and he flipped the camera around on me and then started talking to me because he thought that was funny. And then I look like a dork, and I'm like, well, here's why I think this is an important movie, and I talk about how it is, a pure expression of America. You make a thing and you go get in a van and you go sell it.
Yeah.
And
I really do think that it is the purest form almost of the American dream. Yeah. What we're doing, it really is. And we're probably the best barometer of the economy too.
I think so.
It's the canary in the coal mine when things start to crash. I mean, I remember art shows going bad right before the housing market went down.
Oh my gosh. They were weird.
Yeah. It just got really weird. So
yeah, no, man. And that crash was rough. I mean, that put me out of business for a while. Like I only did a couple of shows. Helen got through it. We were just barely starting to do okay. And
then the crash, it kicked me into doing this body of work, because before I was doing this stuff, it was kind of soul sucking, but it gave me the opportunity to, have studio time where I actually was productive. And that was just, kind of a weird kickstart year for me, before it's like you jury into the Grove, and the Grove was the first show of the season, and I'm like, shit, I got into the Grove. And then you start doing it, and the ball starts rolling, and you're either, you're on board that train, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Well, the thing with me is I was totally frustrated and kind of demoralized by it. And I couldn't, like, it had been at that point, this is quite a while ago now, it's hard to imagine, but I was so I was so poor that I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't pay for more shows.
Yeah.
I just had to go do jobby jobs for a while and gradually get back on my feet.
Yeah. I sold, I had a pedal steel guitar, and I had been learning how to play it, and sold it to get to afford that first run of shows.
Sure.
With the new body of work, I'm like, I sold it. The credit cards were maxed out at the time. And I'm like, I sold that to get gassed by, to go down to the Grove.
That's terrible.
Oh, it was terrible. But then I went down to the Grove and crushed it. So
good.
It keeps us going.
Have we talked about the movie enough? I feel like it's a big, complicated
thing. It is. It's a really complicated subject. And maybe we can go back and talk about it again once you do release it too. I don't know.
Yeah, and we can stop, because it's its own subject. But talking again about this year was so strange, so interesting, and I just had all these revelations about shows that I kind of knew, but were sort of laid bare as everybody was emerging from the COVID thing and having this great time. But I was like, this, to me, this is what really explained it. I was talking to somebody. I'm not going to name them.
You can if you want.
They will know who they are if they're listening. It's a cool lady. I don't care if she knows that I think she's a cool lady. So, and she'll know it's who I'm talking about. I was talking to this lady, and she was saying how the first show that she went to, they made $7,500. Another person was like, "What? That's all you made? Oh my gosh." And do you know how long it was before Helen and I ever had a show where we made that much money?
Yeah.
I mean, it was years and years. And I don't know if she'll talk about this when you interview her, but she never won Best of Show until Winter Park 2 years ago.
Wow.
That's so, for us, it has been a long, long, long journey of just plugging away.
Also, in inventing the wheel on your own. I mean, you talked about getting into shows at the beginning and not being able to, you didn't have a mentor. You didn't have someone who showed you how to do it. And I mean, I don't know if you like to share advice, but I like to tell, I was next to a woman, and all of her work was the same size. And I'm like, where's your giant piece in the back of the booth that brings you in? Like, all you got to do is just do that. And she was like, holy crap. If I ever need a loan, I'm going to her.
You're going to her?
Yeah.
Right. Nice. That was the one thing that somebody did tell us at our first art fair. This old guy, he's not around. I haven't seen him in 20 years almost. Was doing this kind of like abstract, kind of 80s abstract smeary paintings. Okay. And he had like these mats that were real elaborate and layered and cut with all these windows. And it was the kind of stuff you just don't see at shows anymore. Yeah. But there were still some of those people around in the early 2000s. And he was like, yeah, well, I have all these kind of smaller ones that I sell and my bread and butter. And then in the back, I have that big one. It was probably like $3,000 or something, and he was just explaining it. And like, well, that brings people in and like, oh, okay. And that was it. No one ever really explained art shows to us. Yeah. We figured it out ourselves one day at a time for years.
And that's probably who I talked to at the very beginning too, like that kind of advice where it's like the bread and butter. But then I remember talking to, do you know Ray Alphonse? Yeah, I was talking to Ray about that. Like, I thought I had it all figured out. And this is probably, like 15, 20 years ago, Ray. This is abstract painter Ray. And I mean, they're still kind of, but, I was like, well, this is my bread and butter. And then this is and then he's like, I don't want bread and butter. I only want ham.
Yeah. Nice.
And I was like, shit, can you make a living just selling ham?
No. Well, and that's the thing is that I think that art shows have become really overwhelmingly characterized by the ham.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
I mean, I sell ham.
You sell ham.
Yeah. And it's like Aaron Heckenberg says, he's like, well, I call it the Aaron Heckenberg model, but Aaron's like, well, I'm set up for big numbers.
You know what's interesting about Aaron Heckenberg is I didn't realize until recently, I must have read it somewhere online, that he was an Iowa State or University of Iowa printmaking department guy. He might be old enough to have been an actual student of Maurizio Strzynski, who started that department, who's one of the fathers of modern printmaking. That's why Iowa continues to be like the printmaking place. And you always encounter people that went there. Right. Like, oh, that's really cool. It's a bit like going to the writer's workshop with Kurt Vonnegut,
Right.
But anyway, no, I should say Helen and I's printmaking teacher was from Iowa. I mean, he's from Japan, but he had gone to graduate school at Iowa and was a student of Lazansky's. So there's this weird little piece of lineage that we share with him, which I think is probably more obvious with Helen because of what the nature of her work. But I've wanted to talk to Aaron about that, and I never have.
Yeah.
But and Lazansky's famous also for this really amazing suite of drawings. They're called the Nazi drawings.
Yeah.
They're really intense. They're really cool. But yeah.
I'll definitely ask him about that. So not Mark Lewansky, but
no, Maurizio Lazansky.
Got it. Cool. So
yeah, but
he's been my good luck symbol. He's been at every good show I've been at, like right across the street.
Oh yeah. He's a guy who's at good shows.
Yeah, it's what I feel like is as soon as you're making that kind of money, there's there's a whole other level of responsibilities and things that, like, he's the goldfish that's inside the bowl. You're the next size
for sure
bowl. So
the people that do, like, the high earning people that have it all figured out,
right,
who we kind of respect, and they're nice people and everything, they become, you're starting to maintain quite a sophisticated apparatus for your business.
Definitely.
And I would aspire to the level just below that, where you're not so much on the hook. And that's kind of what we've done here, Helen and I, because, I am more and more like my role as the support person in her enterprise is can't be overstated. I'm really involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be. She's pulling huge prints.
She's huge prints, and we got to build all that stuff, and everything we do takes two people.
Right. How's your ego handle that?
You know what? I'm pretty comfortable. I'm getting more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for myself to remind myself that a part of why I've been able to be such a strange artist is because all along I've been there helping with this other thing.
Right. But it's got to be hard on people. Like, I know it's got to be hard on like Genna, who does the background painting, who's an integral part of the Grishchenko's work. And I know it's hard on him. Like, they won an award at La Quinta, and they don't even put his name. Yeah, Signy, congratulations. Or, I know. I know it's hard on like Bonnie Harbston. I know she's very involved in pulling prints with Steve, and she doesn't get credit either. But there's a certain...
Here's the other thing. That's what's a little different about my relationship with Helen as far as her artwork goes. Like, I don't make her artwork.
Right.
It's not a collaboration.
No.
I could see at some point it could develop into that, but I do all of this other stuff that makes it possible. And I'm the constant, ever present second set of hands.
Yes.
And like, I'm usually the truck driver, I'm the reason that stuff happens, and I'm the bigger, stronger person who gets all in a bad mood and gets it all to fit in the van and all of that, it's like, I'm constantly there. It's sometimes I think, well, I'm not doing that much. And then I think about my time and I'm like, God damn, I did that. That was like a full-time job this month working on Helen's stuff, And
is it hard though, when you're like, do you ever do shows where you don't, cause I've done this, and it's kind of a loaded question, cause I know how I would answer it, but like, where you are not showing at a show, like if you don't get in and she gets in and then you're going and helping sell, is that an ego blow, or do you just roll?
No, not at all. Actually, I find it easier to sell her artwork than my own. Like, I'm like a bumbling idiot selling my own artwork.
Well, you could be a fan and not sound like a cheese ball. You can be like, oh my God, isn't this piece amazing that she did? I can't say that about myself.
No, it's true. You can't say that about yourself. And I do have a intimate understanding of it. Right. Like, it's sometimes people are like, well, I'm not the artist. But when I say I can answer any question, I really mean it. I know everything about it.
Right. I'm like, not quite that way with the jewelry, but I can sell some jewels for Susan.
Oh man, it's amazing how easy it is to sell jewelry, isn't it?
Well,
they have to work all day doing it. That's the bad part.
That's the thing. But I have a hard time.
If you just roll up in there for a few minutes, you're like, oh my God.
Especially honestly, being a guy too.
I know.
It's a sexist kind of thing. Like, seeing how if I'm in the booth, a lot of times they defer to me, and I'm like, do I look like Susan Elnora? I could just be a fan though, and just be like, and plus women go all like, you put jewelry on them and they're like, oh yeah, yes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
sure.
You can play the game.
I also think, and I am I'm open to people disagreeing, but I think that the art show scene, it really is kind of a women's scene.
How so?
I think that the audience tends to be women, more often than not, if you get like that dreaded spousal poo-poo, it's because of the husband, it's usually women together, hanging out, buying artwork. And I think that dynamic, and this may only be true of one aspect of art shows. Other people have a totally opposite experience, but I often see like women together out having their Saturday afternoons with as friends, and then they get to a booth and there's like another woman there who they think is really cool and makes this artwork, and they just kind of all creates this feedback loop of of appreciation and spending, and I think with like me, like I'm kind of like this weird, everybody thinks that I'm like a grouchy person or something. I'm just always sitting in my booth. I'm like, come and talk to me, and I see it. I see a different dynamic that exists.
Well, you do have, the Dylan energy is a little, my first question I wrote down, I was like, well, I rarely even look at my stuff. I just, once we start rolling.
What is it?
But my first question, do you hate art shows?
I really,
cause that's I feel like, question. And that's kind of my instinct when I'm coming here, we're like, you hate this shit, don't you? You hate us.
It's funny.
Like, I know you don't. Like we've talked enough, but it's like you hate us, don't you? You hate us. You hate them. you hate all this shit.
You know what? Actually, I'm glad you asked that question because, and this all ties into this whole thing that I'm saying about the way that people perceive other artists. Artists perceive each other, and the way that they, the thing that they're kind of all suffering through together or having a great time together. Mm-hmm. It's that, and I've seen this happen with people when it's easy to start to get into this spiral where you start to kind of resent like the audience and the people at the shows, and you have to be very careful.
Right.
And I have it kind of just leading up to COVID. Like my shows weren't so great, and I didn't feel like I was being rewarded the way I wanted to. And I was getting frustrated with the artwork I was doing. And I could tell, I could feel myself, starting to kind of put that out. Like I knew that was what was happening. Yeah. And you shouldn't ever let that happen.
Well, you can, and that is, that's to bring up that thing that Daryl said to me after he'd seen me like on my, the only weekend I'd had off in 6 weeks, I'd done Jazz Fest with Susie, and like, I was exhausted. I was run down, and here I am with like the best booth at Bayou City back in the heyday of Bayou City, and it's like right there on the lollipop stick.
Mm-hmm.
Right as soon as you walk in, I'm the first booth you see, just on the other side of giant whirly gigs. And he was like, "Why are you doing okay over here?" I'm like, "No, shoot me, I don't want to do this." So yeah, I'm trying that game this year. I'm trying to do I'm looking at my season like, okay, I'm not doing a show until April. And then I'm not doing another one until June. So I'm going to.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. It'll be if April happens, if April's as good as I hope, well, we just kind of depends. Well,
it's and I've been talking about that for the last few years is you hit this point of diminishing returns.
Yes.
And there, it's so easy to get wrapped up in, I need to be doing a show. And then you start talking to artists and they're like going to these shows and like, why are you going to that show? It's like, I like the party. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Or I'm just going because I always go. And you're like, really?
Yeah. I'm cutting some ones that I've relied on in the past that I didn't even apply to. So we'll see how it goes, but it's a whole new model for next year.
Yeah. Well, the thing for me is because I'm spending so much time working on Helen stuff.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's fine. I'm just glad that's the way that it has shaken out. But I do think that I'm going to spend some time very deliberately developing something that's a little bit of a departure from what I've been doing. And I know it seems like I'm always reinventing, but what I'm always doing is I'm always exploring, this continent that I've been exploring for the last, decade plus. I think I need to do a little reassessing, because I'm getting tired, and I need to, it's like, if I'm going to go to the shows with the amount of effort that we put in, and, like if Helen has a double booth and I'm there with my work and then my show is just kind of so, I'm like, why did we make this extra work?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. But yeah, I mean, because I've been there and done it too. I mean, I guess, what I admire about that is that you do have two hands at the table. You have two cards.
Right.
If you got two people sitting at a table of 5, then you're automatically getting 2 slices. But if she's doing a double booth and you're putting your energy into that, and you have more energy to direct to that, then
no, it's true, man, and it's.
But you'll have more energy for the next round too. The next whatever the work is going to be.
Yeah, and I'm really starting to kind of start to put a lot more attention into like my sculptures.
Yeah, I love those.
Which is
the barn that you just finished, or the house.
Yeah, there's a show that's at the Center for the Visual Arts in Wausau, Wisconsin. That I'm in. That it looks like a really cool place. I wasn't able to go to I had to ship all that stuff, but I have a group of that in a show, and the people, everybody asks me about those, and I'm like, damn, really? Because I was just making those for myself. That was a thing that I took. I was, COVID spring. I was like, well, I've got nothing to look forward to. I think I'm just going to do this other project I've had in the back of my mind for a while. And I just started working on it, and somebody noticed it, and other people noticed it. And unfortunately, I ended up having to set it aside for a while to do house projects. And then bam, this year happened, and I was in shows, and I had to go back and concentrate on
the other stuff,
my 2D stuff. And I was really proud of the work that I showed this year.
You should have been.
Thanks.
Great body.
But so I'm probably gonna spend a little more time working on the sculptures, and my galleries, like my one here in Ann Arbor, has a tremendous amount of my work right now, which is good.
I'd love to see one of those. I mean, is that a tricky thing too? Like, do you have to jury? Like, to me, it's almost like Nafsker's vessels. When he was selling jewelry, and it's like, well, the vessels look like the spaceship that the jewelry arrived in, and
I know,
and people are still giving him shit about whether or not he can show it. It's like, well, look, you're an artist. Can you show a sculpture in the center of your booth and as part of your paintings to offset them, or are people gonna get there?
I don't. It does. Well, Whipple does it.
Yeah.
And he juries, I think, often into 2 categories, and that's part of what I've always loved about, looking at John's booth all the time, is that he does that. And to me, that is like the ideal. I feel like every artist should show 2 things like that, because I'm interested I love it. I'm interested in the artist world. I'm not so interested in the artist product.
Yes. And
that's, again, it's like that mentality, that expectation, and that I arrived at art fairs with, is why I've always in such a strange spot, because I know it's not normal. It's what everybody else is doing. And I one day I wake up and I'm like, oh, that's actually not why people are at art shows doing this. Oh, these are businesses.
Well, you seem to
like,
be,
what a moron.
Oh, I don't know. You had a healthy dose of self-loathing anyway before your teachers all told you to hate.
Yeah, that's true.
To do for a living. So.
Yeah, it's true, man. Oh man, you know what? I've been really getting back into comics and stuff too.
Yeah.
Are you
big time?
Still?
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to that podcast, the cartoonist Kayfabe?
No.
It's they put out multiple episodes a week, and it's that guy Ed Piskor, the hip hop history artist.
I know him.
And then another dude who I don't recognize. And a lot of their episodes, they'll just be like, we're looking at the artist edition of like Alex Toth or something, like some old storied illustrator. Yeah. And then there'll be a couple where they actually interview somebody. And they had, while I was driving home 2 nights ago, I listened to an interview with Mike Mignola.
Okay, cool.
That was cool. And a lot of the times I don't even know who the
that's what's good about Merritt too. Sometimes I don't know who he's talking about, but I like the long form. I like him, getting down into the dirt.
Yeah, but I might develop some of that stuff too, because that's kind of like this thing that's always kind of growing in a dish on the side of my laboratory over here in the books. So, kind of retool my art show thing, and I have a lot of attention to be giving to Helen's stuff. And that the last thing I'll say about that is like, it's odd. Like a lot of like you talk about, like, how is that for your ego and stuff. And on the one hand, I feel like, oh, I'm supposed to, it's just like this very like working class ethic thing. It's like, I'm supposed to be like pulling in big dollars too, just because you are. And that's not the expectation.
Yeah.
And the thing about us is like, people don't realize, like, we've been together since we were kids, basically. And so our whole art fair thing, our whole business, our whole experience, like what it has become in recent years, like no matter how you slice it, like that was a thing that we did together.
Yeah.
And who is in more of the support position at various times almost isn't even what it's about. Like it's just the life that we made together,
Amazing. Yeah. And I mean, and that's why you guys are still together too.
Right.
I mean, there's not, and I didn't expect that the way you guys seem to be around each other is that there does not seem to be any kind of, I mean, you both have healthy egos. You're both operating at a really high level, but it doesn't seem to be any ego with each other.
I mean, I'm glad it seems that way. It's not it isn't with each other. Yeah. It's usually us like driving in the van for hours and me getting really angsty and saying like, oh, I'm such a bad artist. I gotta, what am I doing now? I don't even know what and like me just feeling, but it's always me more concerned about like the creative thing.
Right. Well, how do you guys support each other through that? Because if you both, I mean, does she get that way too?
No.
Okay. So she's kind of the rock.
She's kind of the rock on that, and it's funny even when if we go through these periods if I was like doing really well and maybe like she was not doing as well, like I still have the same like existential angst about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Lynn and John Whipple were talking in the movie about like, well, who gets to be
being a pissy
angsty artist that day. And I'm going to have to bring that into my own life. Cause, I'll be like,
I think it's John every day.
God, hey, John doesn't feel good about his art. Then what hope do any of us have?
No, he's just sometimes amazingly like a crabby little guy.
And then maybe that's just the fuel that keeps it going. Then, but
then he's not like you go hang out with them, and he's just like this ball of party sunshine. Yeah. But I think that's how it is for people. I think I'm probably often the same way, and it's like that thing is balanced. It's hard to keep that up, and it's very hard. It's hard to be your best self when you're at a show.
That's true.
And sometimes you get through it and then you like, you sit down to eat dinner or something and you're hanging out and then like, you're able to like, let it all out. And you we're all complicated people, we're all sensitive people. We're all interesting. And that's why we all got to be on the street in a tent,
So we've kind of found out about like what's next for you coming up this year, kind of doing a little self work.
Yeah, I'm just a little self work, but I'll just like a little retool. Yeah. I really do. I think I need to take advantage of the position that we have gotten into in the last few years to like really reassess and, do some other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then I say that, maybe I'll just be like, here I am. I'll probably just show up with more of what I'm always doing. But
you know what? I hope so. I love that.
Oh, it's not going away. No, not that at all. It's just, God, it's so funny. It's like I did those shows and I'm like, I made all this stuff and I think it's great, but I did the opposite way. I didn't
Well,
so done.
Yeah, people want to see what they want to see. I don't know. If you're following what you want to do, it seems like that's what they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to go get ready for One of a Kind. I'm glad you're not going to be there.
Yeah, nice. I'm glad. I'm so happy not to go to Art. We are going to fly down to Art Basel next week.
Oh, cool. You got anybody that's showing down there? You know anybody?
I don't even know we almost weren't going to go because we ended up being so busy this fall.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to go out to La Quinta. It was like a month and a half of like starting from zero, just putting all this stuff together. And I still have an unfinished commission that I've got going out in the studio that I stopped working on to get Helen ready. And we worked so hard. And then like my parents moved, and
that's a lot of life.
Moving down. It is a lot of life. And then like 2 days before we had to leave, Helen's mother fell and broke her ankle in 3 places. No. So we had to go over and help her and deal with all of this. And I couldn't, I was like, oh my God. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. But we had, planned on, we already had a place to stay. And then finally when we were, must've been like 2 days ago while we were driving home, we finally were like, okay, no, that's it. We're going on a vacation.
Nice.
So we got some tickets. We're going to do that. Cool. And then I'm not going anywhere until March.
Good for you, man. I got into this artist society thing here that I can pick up a show every weekend if I wanted. Obviously I'm not going to, but like, it's one of these things that like, you can go down to the thing and people are like, it's not art. It's whatever, but there's no expenses. It costs you $100 to do the show and you can go down and make like $2,000 or $3,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
it's like an artist, like a market
it's just a
thing.
Market. It looks like an art show, happens every weekend. Yeah. And I'm buried into the society. So it's like, if things get tight between here and April, I can go down and do some shows.
Well, that's cool. Does it look good? Like, does it have?
It looks good.
Okay.
I mean, it's right on the plaza. So, all right, my friend, I'm going to get going. Thanks again.
It's been a long talk,
but really great one. Thank you so much.
Hey, right on.
Great talk with Dylan, Will. I really enjoyed hearing all about what went into making that film.
He got into that talk about the movie, and I could tell as we were talking and having that interview that it might be either a two-parter or we were going to have to cut. I mean, honestly, I still think we cut about 30 or 40 minutes. We talked for a really long time. So I appreciate you cutting that into 2 segments. It seemed like an important talk and just digging down deep into the interesting folks that we meet on the road.
It really did. I mean, that transition into talking about the film, it seemed like a good segue and begin just making it about that, because it is a good chunk of your talk about the nuances and everything that goes into creating it. And I just love it when he says, that's what you do. You make a movie, people watch it. And that's how I feel with the podcast. Sometimes it's like we make a podcast, we talk to each other. Some people listen to it, and you just don't know.
You never know. You never know. Yeah, you make this little baby, and you just kind of put it out in the world, and you're like, I don't know. Which is interesting to me when I start to, it went with this podcast. At the very beginning, people would come up to me and say, hey, I listened to that podcast you do. Whereas now it has been more like they just jump into the conversation and start adding to things that you and I have talked about to our different guests. So
I've had people walk up to me and just they don't say hello. They just start saying, hey, that thing that you and Will were talking about? This is what I think. And this is and it's great. It's almost like they're part of the conversation we're having here on the air.
And nobody's told you that they don't like your character yet.
Are you still nursing that wound?
For a while. We'll bring that one up. I like to beat a dead horse, Douglas. I did want to mention one thing. A good friend of the podcast, and it's easier for other people probably to brag on your kids than it is for you yourself. So your son, Oliver Lear, as he's known on SoundCloud, just dropped a brand new album, Gestalt, and it's being streamed for free on SoundCloud. You can listen to that here on the links to the podcast. We're going to be posting that everywhere. You can check it out on our Facebook page. I loved listening to that and breaking up some of the holiday music in our house and playing that.
Oh, I appreciate you listening. I am a proud dad, and he's been making music for quite a while. And he's a music major, and he's worked on the podcast.
It's a beautiful recording. And if you want to get some Oliver Lear in your head that's not just dun, 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 dun. Here comes Douglas. Dun.
It's on there. The song is called Walking. If anyone wants to hear the song without our voices ruining it.
I do. Cool. So check that out. Thank you so much for lending your talents to this podcast, Oliver. It has been a defining part of our branding and our style, and it gets us kicked off every single week. So thank you, sir.
That's right. Well, I appreciate that. Well, happy holidays, everyone, and happy new year, and we will see you in 2022.
Oh my God, let's do it.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigwithglass.com.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.